All right, it's time to strike up the live stream to talk Ohio State football here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, with Big Ten Media Days in Chicago this week on Monday and Tuesday. The best way to do that is to bring in Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts 247 Sports. He is the senior Big Ten writer there. Steve, welcome back from Chicago.
Yep, great to be home from the Windy City, no question about it.
That was my birthplace, but I remember little. I left town when I was about 2. So that was about it for me in the Windy City. Zach Smith, unfortunately, a short stay with Ohio State, at least abruptly leaving. We heard the news come out on either Monday or Tuesday. I believe that was on Monday, a protection order issued by an Ohio judge. And most people watching have probably heard the situation there that actually dates back about 10 years with a number of incidents there. So your take on the situation, Urban Meyer's response, what the university, of course, had to do, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, it's just a tremendously unfortunate situation, I think, for all parties. And in your heart, your prayers go out to the kids that were caught in the middle in this situation between their parents, who've obviously divorced several years ago and now still struggling to deal with one another. And it's now cost Zach Smith his job. The focus, I think, for a lot of reporters, both who cover Ohio State on a regular basis and also for some national and even Midwest reporters, was to figure out what Urban Meyer knew and when did he know it, and did he, what would be the proper word, perhaps enable Zach Smith with the way he kept him on staff and hired him to new jobs and different things like that. So obviously public sentiment, I picked up the Chicago Tribune. Shannon Ryan, one of the outstanding reporters there, wrote a column about it from her point of view, and the same with Nancy Armour in the USA Today, wrote a column about it. Stuart Mandel, very outspoken on The Athletic about the whole situation. Everybody knows Brett McMurphy, who used to work at ESPN, was kind of in the middle of this. And to be very honest with you, Mark, I mean, somebody who had an axe to grind handed Brett McMurphy all this information, and he double-checked it, and he went with it. So some of it was stuff from 2009 that had not been public, part of the public domain per se. There were no charges in 2009, but there was what appears to have been a serious incident. And Coach Meyer said he saw a young coach at that time, a young couple, that he and his wife felt if they had proper counseling and could work through their issues, no need to derail what could have been a promising career. And of course, you know, this story, there are so many interwoven things to it. Zach Smith is the grandson of the former Ohio State head coach, Earl Bruce, who helped give Urban Meyer his first big start back in the mid-'80s as a graduate assistant at Ohio State. Zach Smith was a student coach at Florida, then spent some time at Marshall and Temple as a full-time assistant coach before coming with Urban Meyer in 2012, and he was among the coaches on that first staff, and he was the only surviving coach from that 2012 staff. A lot of them have gone on to other jobs, some of them to head coaching jobs, and so on. So a lot to this story. I think as I read in particular what Nancy Armour wrote in USA Today, was that Meyer, I wouldn't say he just sloughed it off, but he used some terms like it's he said, she said. You don't know what the truth is with these domestic violence things. There was an incident, but no charges were filed. And in the year 2018, all of those things raise red flags, because we know as a society and following these issues that typically, you know, the spouse probably is going to be dissuaded from pressing charges if something were to happen, or at least we've seen that a lot of times. Now, there's also the benefit of the doubt that perhaps she was doing things to set him up as well. You just don't know. But Meyer caught a little bit of grief because of the way that he discussed the issue in a cavalier type manner. And again, put in a very difficult position here, and he had done everything he could possibly do to help Zach Smith out. And at the end of the day, I don't think he had much of a choice. He had to let him go.
No, and it's well depicted by you in terms of the political ramifications and the social ramifications of this kind of situation in 2018 versus what it might have been years and years ago.
Yeah, it was a different climate 9 years ago, certainly, with how these type issues may have been viewed in the light of day to day. I mean, it's troubling to be involved, to even have a hint of involvement of something like this, and then be put in a position to counsel and work with young men. I just think I think our society, even football people today, don't want that. So, Ohio State had a very good lesson for their players. Their football and their basketball teams came together just yesterday and had a lecture. The lady, her name, I think is it Brenda Tracy, I believe might be her name. She was a victim of a sexual assault at Oregon State many years ago, and she goes around the country and lectures schools and people about that whole situation and how to not put yourself in that situation. Very telling that Ohio State is walking the walk. They are trying to counsel young men in the proper fashion and how to behave in our society and treat people, women, and all people with proper dignity and respect. And to me, it was at least a juxtaposition against what Meyer was being accused of while he was in Illinois.
Yeah, I didn't see all of Urban Meyer's comments, but he was pretty much slicing it straight in regards to, well, we don't know. And
yeah,
in this climate, you can't necessarily say that because we know that most of the time that when there is smoke, there is fire, and especially when there's a track record and there's few past incidents that most likely there's an ongoing issue and that it's extremely serious, and victims, when they speak out, need to be taken seriously and all of those things. But we also know that the truth is that the accused aren't always guilty in these cases. And I think he was just trying to state that we don't know.
Yeah.
But you have to be extra sensitive about it. And again, if it's something that has been committed, then it's extremely, extremely serious and has to be taken in that manner and not dealt with in a cavalier way, as you mentioned.
It would take us an hour to go through this whole timeline of all the different incidents, but I will say there was some dispute about whether something occurred in 2015, and Meyer dismissed it out of hand, saying he had no knowledge of it. I had done a public records request with the Powell, Ohio Police Department. It's a suburb on the north side of Columbus where apparently Zach and his ex-wife, or at least that's where she lived. And there was an incident in May where he dropped his son off at the apartment building and pulled into the driveway, which he had been told by the police he shouldn't do that. And in some regards, it's unclear whether there was a formal protective order in place or he was just operating against the advice of the police. But one way or the other, he did get cited for trespassing in that instance. There was apparently an issue in 2015 where she filed a complaint with the police, and he was accused of a felonious assault and domestic violence. And that report and where those charges went, and that report just came to light here in the last day or so. So, again, I think someone, perhaps her attorney, hard to speculate, put all this information into the hands of Brett McMurphy, and he verified it and ran with it. And Urban didn't look very good trying to deny knowledge of things that may or may not have happened.
Steve, thanks for putting this in perspective. We'll move on to the football, but thank you so much, because this is the story from Big Ten Media Days, certainly, and in college football over the past several days. But we only have you for a certain period of time. So any naming of a replacement or thoughts in replacing Zach Smith?
Yeah, the primary thought is it's going to be Brian Hartline, who played, I believe, 8 years in the National Football League, a lot of it with the Miami Dolphins and the Cleveland Browns. And he is a guy, obviously, about the time he retired from the NFL, Ohio State was playing Clemson in the college football playoff, and he came to Columbus. I think he has a home in Columbus, and he came to the facility and was working out with the team and helping prepare them for that game against Clemson. And he kind of got his foot in the door, and he's never left. In many regards, he was Zach Smith's assistant wide receivers coach, though he has never been a formal coach by any means. I guess you'd say he was a quality control assistant this last year. And so it's going to be interesting to see if they seg him right into that job. The Athletic, or it wasn't The Athletic, it was another website, reported that it will be Brian Hartline. And even some recruits are noticing that he's starting to reach out to them, apparently, and or at least they've been told to expect that Brian Hartline will be the wide receivers coach. And I don't have a real issue with this. He's played at the highest level for 8 years for the best wide receivers coaches in the world in the National Football League. So he's a technician. He knows his business, how to get in and out of breaks and how to run routes and how to catch the football. That's not an issue. I think there's much more, obviously, than just teaching kids how to catch and run routes to be a college football coach. You also have to recruit and budget your time, game plan, all these other many things that are involved. But what Urban Meyer said, sometimes you're a little bit leery of NFL guys because are they going to come in and, sneer at you for having to do the grunt work? And he said that wasn't the case with Brian Hartline, whether it was making coffee or writing out the scout team cards, to prepare the scout team. It sounds like he has embraced those roles, and Urban Meyer said he has been a very important part of their football program since he came on board. And so it looks like every indication that'll be official in the next they may have to post the job for 7 days. I don't know what the state law is, but the timing of this couldn't be any worse. So they're starting practice on August 3rd, a week from Friday, and we'll have a 4-week preparation going up to the opener against Oregon State on September the 1st.
Now, Steve, I remember Brian Hartline's career at Ohio State and in the NFL extremely well, but correct me on one point here. Now, he was never a guy that looked the NFL prototypical receiver when it comes to build and speed and everything else. As you mentioned, technician. And when he left, and again, I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, he left a year early. Terrell Pryor was the quarterback, and there was a thought there that he wasn't going to gloss his statistics anymore with Terrell Pryor playing quarterback for his senior season. Didn't catch maybe 20, 25 passes as a junior. I just thought it was an ill-fated move for him to go to the NFL. He certainly proved me wrong. He turned into a Pro Bowl wide receiver, put up some huge years in Miami in particular.
Yeah, I think you look at him, he doesn't look all that threatening as a wide receiver, as I recall, but he was also a great track star. He was had good sprint times and was an outstanding hurdler. And obviously that involves a lot of agility in addition to speed as well. So I think he came in as an elite athlete. He had been injured in his high school career, but was able to come in and make some inroads in his college career. As you said, he played with Terrell Pryor there at Ohio State primarily, and left school a year early to go to the NFL. But again, that was the Jim Tressel regime, and there's been a lot of water under the bridge since then. So I don't envision or see anybody with any hard feelings about that. I think he's a guy that shows up with a smile on his face and goes to work every day. And I think that's what Urban Meyer's looking for, somebody that he doesn't have to worry about, what their situation is. He and his wife just had a child here in the last probably 6 months or so. I remember seeing her with their child at spring practice. So maybe that'll be a consideration as well for him, that does he really want to work, and this is the joke I always use, 80-hour work weeks, 57 weeks out of the year. With the time that these people put in is amazing. Mark, we will go over there for interviews, and maybe we'll talk to one assistant coach, but then you'll see Larry Johnson, who's been a veteran assistant coach. He's walking by with his bicycle because he needs to take a 20-minute break to go ride his bicycle and clear his head, and then come back and finish up his day the last couple of hours. I mean, the amount of time that they devote to to those kids, that program, and everything that's involved with it is staggering, to say the least.
And that is exactly the first thing that ran through my head when you said Brian Hartline was in line for this job. He made a ton of money in the NFL. He signed one huge contract with the Dolphins.
Definitely.
You would wonder about the incentive, but if you want to coach, that's what you need to do. And of course, if you're going to get your coaching start, to do it at Ohio State.
Yeah, with Urban Meyer, who has put so many guys. I mean, I don't know that. I mean, he would claim Mike Vrabel as a success story. He was only there a year or two, but he's now the head coach of an NFL team. And of course, in his pedigree, he played for Bill Belichick and was with O'Brien there for a while with the Patriots as well. So you look, Tom Herman is the head coach at the University of Texas. I mean, there have been guys that have been on his staffs who have gone on to do so many great big things. It'd be a good crucible, I think, if you want to be a coach, a college coach. This is a place to definitely be there. And Vrabel is an example of an NFL guy who made, I would estimate somewhere probably between $50 and $100 million playing NFL football. He was there a long time with the Patriots. And yet, he had a passion for the game and coaching, and remains to be seen if this, I think we need to hear it from Brian to say it himself, but sounds like at least for this year, he may be the guy, and then maybe they'll sit back after the season and decide, does he want to do this full time going forward?
All right, folks, I see that we've got tons of questions and comments on the chat. What we're going to do here, Steve's
got time to do about 5 minutes or so if you want.
Well, Steve's got about 5 minutes. Exactly. Steve's got about 5 minutes. I can capture this, Steve, and we can come back in a week or two, and we'll give you the questions off the live chat. Was there anything when Urban Meyer could finally get to football? Was there anything substantial that he had to say about his team?
We'll hit the high points really quickly. I think Dwayne Haskins, they are very excited about him taking over at the quarterback position. I asked him during one of the podium sessions, when the moment arrived that Joe Burrow wasn't going to be back and was transferring to LSU, did you see Dwayne take ownership at that point? And Coach said, yeah. It's impossible for anybody in Meyer's eyes to match up to what J.T. Barrett did the last 4 years, and from a leadership potential as just opposed to his production and the number of games that they won on the field. But he thinks Haskins is on the right track. At the same point, Tate Martell has made himself an elite player in Coach Meyer's eyes as the backup quarterback. And even the third string guy, Matthew Baldwin, who many people thought was an afterthought, only started one season at Lake Travis down in Texas, that perhaps he was just going to be a placeholder. He's up to 210 pounds. He's been rehabbing his knee injury that ended his season last year, and they like him as well. Tuff Borland, the outstanding middle linebacker who finished the year as the starter last year, suffered an Achilles injury back in, I want to say, in March. And typically those could take up to a year to heal. Coach Meyer said that he has been making tremendous progress. OSU put out a picture or a video of him running during preseason conditioning. And while he will not be full go at the start of preseason practice, I think that he is on a timeline to be a contributor probably in the last 2/3 of the season. I mean, they play Penn State. They play Rutgers in a Big Ten game early, which, again, I don't think anybody would be too concerned about that. But the rubber hits the road on September the 29th when they go at Penn State. If Tuff Borland can be in the lineup that day, that gives them a much better chance to win that game in particular, which strikes up as one of the key games of the entire season. So sounds like he is on his way back, and that is tremendous. The tight end position, he is very happy with Luke Farrell and says that he would be the starter today at that position. They've got an outstanding freshman, Jeremy Ruckert, coming in as well from Long Island, New York. So those were some of the high points. I think there's a lot of layers. Coach, I know, was chuckling when he mentioned that Chase Young, the sophomore defensive end, is 6'5", 270, and he is excited to see him play. And when you put him on one end and Nick Bosa on the other, the havoc that could be wreaked if a team isn't locked down on that offensive line, going to be a lot of fun to watch. So, Yeah, they start practice next Friday. I think they'll probably start with a freshman practice or two. And I guess this may be something that's college football wide that I wasn't aware of, but he mentioned 25 practices, where in the past I know that the number was 29 before the first game. And since they did away with two-a-days last year, those guys, they spread it out over 34 days. This year it's 25 practices in roughly 29 days, so they will have a few days off in there leading up to that first game.
Draymond Harris, Isaiah Prince, and or Draymond Harris. I'm thinking Raymond Harris from 25 years ago. Draymond Jones, Isaiah Prince, and Paris Campbell accompanied Meyer. In your discussions with the Buckeyes, anything out of those guys of note?
Well, Paris was devastated losing Zach Smith. I mean, he's a fifth-year senior, and he's been with him every day of his college career, and he was broken up about that. But he said as leaders of the team, they're going to push forward with whoever it may be. If it is Hartline as a receiver, he is also excited about what Dwayne Haskins is going to bring. I know they asked Draymond Jones, the defensive tackle, what he sees about the quarterback position, and he says all three of those guys are elite. So that is what is, I think, getting people excited. To have the players kind of back up what the coach is saying and say that the potential is there to have very little drop off at that critical key position. Isaiah Prince talked about, I don't think they've settled at the tackle positions, whether he will play the left tackle or the right tackle. Thayer Munford, who got in as a true freshman a little bit last year, is going to start at one of them, and he's going to start at the other. Prince is among the most improved players probably in the entire program. He really had his struggles a couple of years ago when he was I think Clemson really took him to task and in that playoff game a couple of years ago. So he's come a long way, and those two guys will get that sorted out. They don't know who the center is going to be. And honestly, you got four guys in position for the two guard spots, all of whom have played at least a little bit or started some games. So it'll be interesting to see how those three interior positions really shake out.
So for anybody out there that's jumping on the chat a little bit late, obviously once we finish the conversation in the next few seconds with Steve, it will process and post to my YouTube channel. Then you can go back and you can watch the entire thing. You can see the live chat as it plays out. Everybody in the live chat with a lot of questions and comments, I'm going to capture those. We'll have Steve back in the next week or two, and we will address those comments and questions then. Steve Hellwagon, just fresh back from Big Ten Media Days to break down the Buckeyes for us from 247 Sports and Bucknuts. So join him right there. Steve, we always appreciate the time and the great insight.
Yep, no problem, Mark, anytime.